Okay, good morning. This is Marina Crane, and I have two guests with me, Missy and Jane. And they're Indigenous, and it's May 8th, so it's the weekend of Mother's Day. And so our topics are going to be all over the place because I haven't seen Missy and Jane for quite a while. And it's more like a gossip session than an actual, information, but it's information too. So we were having a discussion on infidelity because Missy is in the process of leaving a relationship because the guy is a cheater, chronic cheater. And we were having a conversation about relationships after the fact because, at the same time too, a lot of stuff in terms of healthy human sexuality has to be explained in terms of the difference between men and women. And so I just finished explaining that men at least have to have erection 5 times during the night. And if they don't, then something's the matter with them medically. Now for women, our whole physiology is so different too in terms of oxytocin and just things that stimulate us. So a lot of things that would stimulate a man is not healthy for a woman in terms of just taking care of our mental health and our physical health as well. So the discussion was on being sexual after a breakup. And the problem that I find, especially with Indigenous women who've had children and are grandmothers or they're leaving, is once they get away from that individual, they just shut down. They stop being sexually active. And I've had women in my home when I'm trying to say to them, you're young, there's no reason why you stop being sexual. Now, the whole notion of religious dogma is thou shalt not. The whole premise of I'm going to be in a relationship, live with somebody. I'm going, no, take that out of the equation. Don't even think that, because you have to think a certain way in order to understand your needs. So the question is, how do you take care of yourself when you're sexually aroused? And I explained the situation too. I said, I'm heterosexual, and I defined what asexual is. Now, in my previous podcast, I've said that I haven't been sexually active in 49 years. Whereas, a man, I don't think a man, every day, their whole physiology is set up just to have sex, just to produce, having children. Whereas a woman, it's unless you kick us on the side and say, wake up, let me stimulate you. We really don't need to be sexually active or even have children unless we choose to. And that's the point, is the choice. Now, if you've been thinking for a while that you don't have a choice, and all of a sudden you realize, oh my goodness, I've been serving this man, and look at what he's done. He's an alcoholic. He's a womanizer. Once a cheater, always a cheater. And I explained this in the sense that when you're looking for a man or a healthy man, and we'll call this we'll say any human beings who are in a relationship and they find something's not right, without cheating, and this is the point that I'm trying to make, is the two individuals decide they're going to go their separate way just because they've outgrown themselves or for whatever reason, where there is no infidelity involved. Okay, get that through your head. Most of the time, people break up because they're just sick and tired of infidelity. That's not always the case. And if you think of it that way, where you're just decided that, we're just not compatible, I'm not happy, I thought I was in love, but I'm not in love. Because emotions, and we learn things and we move forward. So the question is, when you're heterosexual, you cannot shut it off. Even though I say I'm not asexual, so for 49 years I've been heterosexual. So what does that mean? That means I still find men attractive. I'm still turned on physically by seeing them and aroused. So how do I deal with those feelings without jumping their bones? See, and this is the point here. And this is what I want to make clear, because later we're going to be talking about Nathan Chasing Horse. And the premise too is like this little libido in our brain. Sure, we think, okay, we look at somebody, and as women, because Missy and Jane are mature women and they've both had children, whereas for me, I've never had children. Now, this libido, this little part of our brain, is thinking, oh, that guy is good looking. I'd like to have sex with this guy. Okay, but it's a thought, or like, gee, something appealing about that person is energy or something, and that you're just sexually aroused by them, but you don't act on it. You do not act on it, because you have to have a conversation, one-on-one, whether or not you're sexually attractive to each other, or the dialogue happens. But at the moment before the dialogue happens is a very critical moment where there's a balance of limerence. And limerence has to do with unresolved trauma as a child. Now, even the trauma is in different degrees of trauma. So if you've been traumatized under the age of 10, it's a little different than if you've been traumatized under the age of 16, or even when you've become, like when you've already know what consent is. So the whole premise, too, is that little libido in human development determines how bad your limerence is going to be when you become and have that thought about how sexually attractive you are to the opposite sex. Because you're heterosexual or homosexual, whatever your desire is, you still have that thought about having that physical. No, there's no intimacy in terms of physical, it's just the thought. Now, why does it come up with Nathan Chasing Horse? Because human beings, and this is the whole premise with men, like last month, 60 million men uploaded a video on how to rape their girlfriends and wives, how to drug them and rape them while they're unconscious. Like, this is a growing trend in terms of how all of a sudden, masculinity and how the male brain has been functioning is slowly surfacing, percolating to the top, because as women, we have to understand. A lot of times men are afraid to talk about how they feel, or even the fact that putting boundaries down. And if they don't put boundaries down, then women just think they're available. Now, what does that have to do with Nathan Chasing Horse? And again, I'm going to say this. This man is dangerous to children. You cannot trust him around children at all. The amount of pornography that they found and the amount of stuff he put on the internet, like even the ones, and I say, okay, before I go on, if this is disturbing, you can turn off my podcast. But I'm very frank about this because it has to do with how we perceive and how we as individuals can slowly slip off as we're balancing our life, you kind of reflect and wonder, how could somebody do such a thing to children? So the whole premise is, at some point, he thought about having sex with a child. Now, people can think about having sex with a child just like they can think of having sex with a woman, or sex with a desirable, handsome man who looks like a model, or a football player, or just someone who seems to be mentally, able to be a good provider. You can think about that because it's a fact of life. However, you don't act on it. Okay, so that's the thing. At some point, men act on what they thought. So when Nathan Chasing Horse thought what it would be like to have sex with a child, he acted on it. And once he acted on it, it became unforgivable. Okay, so when I talk to women about heterosexual and the desire to be involved in a relationship, I'm saying as women, we have a choice. But a lot of times we don't think we have a choice. But for me, 49 years without being sexually active was and is a choice. See, and that has a lot of impact and power in it. Because then I've had practice talking to various men about just sexuality. So anyway, my two guests are here, and we're going to have a discussion, and eventually we'll have some discussions on my trip to Las Vegas. I haven't seen them in a while, so don't know if you have any questions, any topics, anything after what I've said. Especially you, like you're gonna leave your husband.
I mentioned earlier before the podcast that, and I found it interesting, and someone hit it on dead point on TikTok. How when did I emotionally left him, and physically? Well, physically we had sex because I chose to, because the topic you talked about, like how do we get that met? So for me emotionally, I left. I was just trying to pinpoint. I don't know when that I emotionally leave him, but physically back to the needs, the desires, because he's my partner, was met. But I'm not happy. To me, like I know when, and because of him sleeping with so many people, and during his intoxication times, where he said he was passed out or whatever, or drinking too much, and in his sober timeline, so alcohol, and then when he was sober, so he made it. He slept with women, both two separate situations, two different.
Yeah, but that's a man. He's got to have sex. What made you think that there was a difference between him being sober and him being drunk? He's a man.
Well, drunk because I've been there before myself.
But you're a woman. You're a woman. Your biology and how you are sexually aroused is totally different than a man.
Mm-hmm. That part I'll never know.
Yeah, because you have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
See, I find a lot of young Indigenous women, and I'm just saying this as an Indigenous elder. For some reason, if Jane here
mm-hmm.
had issue with you and me because we're older, then she had anger and unresolved issues.
Mm-hmm.
I find when I go into a room,
mm-hmm.
when somebody gives me tobacco to pray within a circle,
mm-hmm.
and there's someone in that circle, like I usually have some people who are the hosts,
mm-hmm.
and they invite me.
Mm-hmm.
So I've gotten to the point where I've just been around so many young people who have a lot of hate in their heart,
mm-hmm.
and so I say to the host, you have to protect me, because when I come into that circle and there's people who hate, they don't know me. They only hate what I represent, and that's a female, an Indigenous elder. They don't know me, and yet they'll have hate. I've seen it, and people have observed it, and I said, mm-hmm. Did you see how they treated me? And they said, the person says, yes, any elder would have walked out. Okay, because there are, and even just the fact, like even in work, sometimes young men will project stuff on Indigenous boys, will project onto older Indigenous women because they have unresolved trauma from whatever happened in their personal life. Even though they don't know you, they will still lash out. So that's why I'm saying, like, it's the whole thing about healing and understanding your trauma is really all tied to your identity and who you believe you are. And based on that is basically what you're at right now. It's a turning point in your life. You're leaving this man, but yet you're still going to have a sexual life.
I'm going to date somebody.
Yeah, but see, the point is, I've talked with various,
mm-hmm.
like many Indigenous women whose husbands have cheated, and they come from my community. They've got grandchildren. There's young women
mm-hmm.
capable of being sexually active and aroused and all this because
mm-hmm.
they're heterosexual. They have a history of relationships, all that. I don't, okay? But I still say I'm heterosexual. I still
mm-hmm.
get turned on.
Mm-hmm.
When I talk to them, Missy, they say the same damn thing, but you know what? When they leave my house, there's no sexual activity. It's one thing for them to talk about it, but they're so scared of meeting somebody who's like their previous relationship. like a cheater, someone with a drinking problem, someone, all this issue, they are so scared that they freeze and suppress and never get into a relationship. And that's what I was talking about in terms of like, we need to have a conversation here, because it's one thing to say you're going to do this, but when it comes right down to it, and you're alone in yourself, and you say you move here, and you find someone, highly likelihood of you being attached to someone similar to your ex-partner is huge. It's huge.
Okay, so I'm just thinking about it as I'm listening to you. I want to get rid of that thinking of, you said earlier about what we should be doing, or the society or system, what we should be doing is, or what the Bible is. I want to get rid of that garbage. I want peace and just get that off and stop being my worst enemy.
Okay, here's an example.
So I'm going to be honest. Yes, that's what's like love your, the vows. So I don't want to carry that. I don't.
Well, but you lived with it. That's why I said
lived with it.
You lived with it for decades, and it's a hard thing to, sort of put on the shelf and say, oh, no, that didn't work. See, and for me, and I, again, like I said, I haven't been sexually active for 49 years. So a lot of whatever problems women have in terms of sexuality, I don't have that library. I don't have those books on my shelf to pull it out and say, okay, this is what I did wrong. Let me look. No, I don't have that. But I'll use an analogy. When I was younger and I was sexually active, because I loved to howl at the moon. Just like and I was quite notorious for howling at the moon. But you know what? Nobody knew. Nobody knew when I would go into the city, go night clubbing, look back my eyes, or just sort of say something, and bang, there's this energy, and okay, let's get out and go back to your apartment. One night stand. Like, I was notorious for one night stands. Just terrible. Terribly enjoying it. But that was my private life. Mm-hmm. That was my private life. And a lot of times, because I'm an elder, see, in the 70s, and even like when I was sexually active, women couldn't own a house or a credit card. And even Indigenous women couldn't marry who they wanted to marry. So there's a lot of restrictions in terms of gender apartheid. Okay, but I just knew that I had some other unresolved things that I just had to step back and say, no, I've got to really self-reflect. I didn't know at the time that that's what I was doing, but the reality of male and female, and this is why I have the discussion in terms of the podcast, is men are built different than women. And the more a woman realizes that, then the more they're able to just sort of sit in their selves and their sexuality. Because like this fellow, I'll call him Wachashtawashte, which is a name for, in Dakota, means good man. So, and that's what, the definition of a good man is, Wachashtawashte. So I say to him, yeah, when I was sexually active, I didn't tell anybody. This is my personal life. Now that I'm an elder, it's like all of a sudden I'm telling everybody everything, and and I didn't realize like it was part of a gossip thing. Okay, I just thought people were interested in caring about me. They weren't, because they had unresolved traumas too. They're like narcissistic Machiavellian characters where they just like ravaged dogs pulling away at the scraps, and I'm the scraps, even though I don't have anything, they just want to pull away at something, like just because something has happened to them. I use that as figuratively, but my discussion with Wachashtawashte was that men historically, and even to this day, have been given permission to be promiscuous, to go and fuck around. And the whole point is like, yes, when you're younger and you're thinking of having sex and you act on it, there is a point where you become monogamous and put boundaries down. But if you cannot do that, you're continuously being promiscuous, even though you're in a relationship. Now that's the difference. Okay, because like I said, women, for some reason, have programmed men to think that it's natural, even when you're in a relationship, to be promiscuous, when it isn't. See, promiscuity for men and women is a way of healing. Now, all that healing would have taken part, in your late teens, early adulthood, because you're learning, you're just exploring your sexuality. Like it should be put to rest once you find out once you decide what monogamy is. See, and for me, when I'm talking to Joshua Jay, I said, yeah, I'd go into town, have sex, come home, and nobody knew. Nobody knew about my sexual life. None. There was no marriage, no relationship, no children, nothing. This was my personal life. I empowered myself to walk this world this way. And men do that. Okay, because men, they're constantly, like I said, sexually aroused. Their whole purpose in life is to penetrate women so they can breed. Whereas women, we have a choice whether or not we're going to accept it. And men do not like that. Okay, because that's why they come up to you, oh, you're the most beautiful woman in the world. Or like they just wine and dine you, or whatever the hell they do to convince you that this is your life. You don't have to do a damn thing. I'm going to look after you. And a woman will just say, okay, without even understanding that they too have a sexual identity. Okay, so I'm talking to this guy with Joshua today, and I'm saying, yeah, I was promiscuous. And he says to me, oh, you broke hearts? And I said to him, what do you mean broke hearts? There was no love, no intimacy in being promiscuous. It was all physical. I said, and as a man, I said, you don't understand the consequences for women. A woman being promiscuous could mean that she could accidentally get pregnant. And then who's going to look after the child? I said, so when a woman is promiscuous, she has more at stake than a man does. I said, so yeah, whose heart is broken? Sure as hell it's not the man. It's the woman if she finds herself pregnant. And that's just the history of it. So a lot of times in my podcast when I talk about limerence, I talk about that's an infatuation that develops because a child had trauma, either under the age of 10. It's more extreme if the child has been sexually, like when I say sexual, I mean intercourse. And again, to my audience, if it's offensive, now's the time to turn my podcast off. But the reality of it is when Nathan Chasing Horse, when there were people who had to look at the video because they had to identify what hotel he was created these videos. There were only a few that were in Las Vegas, and those were the ones that he was charged with. The rest, like even when he was here in Sutana, he videotaped this. He met her at 14. He took her out 3 times. She was 15, and she documented to the Sutana police that he had videotaped her. So he'd been videotaping even before 20 years ago. I truly believe he was a high risk teenage boy, which meant that he needed a lot of psychiatric help. So we have a lot of high risk behavior in both male and female, but because we don't understand human sexuality and how trauma plays into it, a lot of times women are triggered and they don't want to talk about it. They just say no, just sort of want to have a sound in the background. No. I don't have to hear this. La 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 la. Mm-hmm. But the reality of it is, if you do that, then you're only hurting children, because it's the children who are the ones that are looking for you to protect them. So when people say, well, why do you do this work? I said, because I'm an elder. I can yell out, stop.
To me, it is important for you to advocate. Now when I'm listening to you, it is important that you still, like yourself, advocate and talk.
Well, even when I was working with women's health 30 years ago, mm-hmm. There was a fellow, his name was Billy, mm-hmm. good-looking Kiowa man, just heartthrob. He was in a relationship, and I already knew about my sexuality. Like I said, it's 49 years, and I approached him. I said, I feel like I love you, but because it's your nervous system. This limerence attached to your nervous system. So it was attached to me when I was promiscuous. But see, I had to stop being promiscuous and reflect. So I spoke to Billy. I said, I know it's not love. I know it isn't. I just have this arousal. I know we need to do some work. We'll just, I said, I'm fighting these feelings, but I want you to know that I'm dealing with it. And so we had this conversation, and this is what I'm saying. If you're with a washashta washte, he's going to listen. He's not going to try and manipulate you or try and say, "Oh, I can help you by let's go up to the bedroom and fuck." He's not going to say that. A washashta washte is going to say, "Yes, I understand what you're talking about. I'm listening here. Like you're challenging me because you're saying you're attracted to me, but I'm going to hold space for you because I know somewhere some injustice was done to you." See, and that's the critical thing about Indigenous women. There are so many of us who are murdered and missing. And why? Why hasn't there been a wachashta washte in our lives at an early age? Why hasn't there been, somebody who could teach us? And it's not our parents' faults. And this is part of my podcast too, is to say Indian residential schools sure fucked up generations and generations. I said this whole limerence is based on for children to not even feel. My mother was never hugged. My father was never hugged. As children, 5 years old to 16, they were never told, "Oh, sweetie, dear, honey." No, they were treated like animals in those residential schools. They were treated like dogs. Some dogs today are treated better than how my parents were treated in residential school. I think that's why I prefer to have my dogs outside. Because I know when I see human beings treating animals better than they would have treated my parents or my grandparents or any Indigenous people who lived in those Indian residential schools. It's heartbreaking. But yet, because of that, they didn't understand love, and they kept on looking for it. My mother used to say, she said, it really affected my marriage. It really affected, she said that. But then they had so many white people, or issues, trying to say, "You've got the answer, I can help you." And yet, how could they help when they came from a different culture? See, a lot of my podcasts, I talk about Indigenous women because it's a culture. And when I met Wachashta Washte, he's not Indigenous. And I thought, why am I bending over backwards to educate this person about, what my life is living in Sudina but the reality is like I'm a matriarch. I didn't realize I was raised to be this way. Like my mother, there's a term called fawning, where people don't want to cause any problems. Like, so it's called fawning, and that's part of the whole thing about limerence and fawning, and if there's trouble, they don't want. Oh, I don't want to discuss it. I don't want to cause trouble. Like if you're not assertive, and you just don't want to cause. Oh, like most people when I talk about human trafficking, oh, I don't want to know. Oh, Marina, you're into that stuff. I don't know what you get out of it. I'm going. That's part of fawning. That is a part of fawning because you don't want to create any triggers. So that's why in my podcast I'm going, if it triggers you, you can turn it off. Because the point is fawning is a way of a person not dealing with something that triggers them. Because they don't want to have an argument. So, when in your relationship, when, he's rational and that he's cheated because he was drinking or he was cheating because he was sober, that in its way, when you're not leaving him, is a form of fawning too, because you don't want to create any problems. You want to stay in the relationship. And again, you got to understand, just like Nathan Chasing Horse knew how to pick out energy from women, like we're animals.
It's nasty.
Well, yeah, because my girl is 16. When I'm looking at my girl, I thought about Nathan Chasing Horse. I'm like, I wouldn't want my girl to touch her at 16, and I'm like, this man really did so bad. I don't know why he's glorified or televised in a nice, beautiful way because he's famous. I'm like looking at my girl staying sober And I mean, in a sober-minded mom to daughter, I'm like, how can he do such an ugly, gross? How can someone defend him?
A lot of
A
people,
16-year-old.
a hell of a lot of people
my-
out there who are Indigenous, who don't live in Indigenous communities, who have no connection to their roots. Either they've been adopted or fostered out, or they live in an urban setting. So people say, well, he was a movie star. I'm going, no, he was selling spirituality. He was saying, if you follow this way, you'll connect to your ancestors. He the youngest, one of the, this is just, there is proof that he's been with a 10-year-old child too. Like he's, and the thing is, adults, like how conditioned are the adults to fawn around him that they didn't see, they knew what the hell he was doing, but they didn't want to create any friction. And they allowed him to be a perpetrator for 20 years. Some of the survivors, like one knew him for 35 years, another knew him for 25. So when I met him, he was 30. Now understand this, by 2000, I think 13 or 15, he had an 18-year-old daughter. So that means he had to have been a father by 15 or 16.
You do the math. Yeah.
Okay, so when I talk about fawning and just limerence as well, because a lot of times children who are looking for attention, like a father figure, because they're either the missing dad or missing mom, or there's no intimacy, no hugging, no like cuddling, validation, like I love you, like there's, like I said, my parents never had that, my grandmother either. So it's a legacy. It's a legacy that they are not responsible for. Those clergymen, whatever priests, white people, Wasechus, I mean, their crimes and what they did to generations of Indigenous kids, they are not held accountable. They are not. But sure as hell, when I advocate and I say, if it's uncomfortable, I'm saying it because I have a voice. My parents didn't have a voice. My grandparents didn't have a voice. Do you know, I was talking with a woman, we were talking at a university, and there were all these PhDs. And I said, my mother, when she first got pregnant, thought she was going to have a litter of puppies. And there was a academic, Wasechus woman, started laughing, all by herself, in a crowd, while I'm talking. And then I just continued. I didn't get mad at her. I just said, the reason my mother thought she was going to have a litter of puppies is because they never taught her healthy human sexuality. Never knew about menstruation, ejaculation, nothing. They treated her like a dog. I said, how many generations of children were treated like that in those places? My mother and her mental health and the psychosis she had to go through her whole life. I use the analogy of psychosis in the sense that the only analogy is when you see somebody drunk and you're trying to talk to them and they don't talk, you think like something's the matter, they're not listening to me. That's a form of psychosis because they're not in the real world because they're intoxicated. But people who aren't intoxicated go through psychosis too.
The same
thing. Like they're not in touch with reality, so they have to have someone who's anchoring them into reality. And a lot of what Nathan Chasing Horse did with the Waweepi ceremony, because it's all done in dark, like as you go into a nightclub, and you have vulnerable people there who are scared in the Waweepi ceremony because he's tied up in a bundle. A lot of people I believe, went into psychosis, and so when he's talking to the spirits like a séance, they're scared, but he's the only conduit that's keeping them into reality, which is how he was able to manipulate. Because when someone is going through a psychotic state, you need to have someone who knows what balance is and what healthy human sexuality is. You don't need a predator who's going to use that thread. That because it's like a what do you call when you throw a life preserver? You're attached to that cord, and that person's holding onto that cord because for dear life because you're the only one that's holding onto that reality, and that's how he manipulated through spirituality in those ceremonies because a lot of people had trauma. He with my niece in ceremony he hit her over the head with a rattle to scare her. One of the ladies, one of the girls who he got 10 years for, in ceremony he would scare her, hitting her over the head with a rattle, because he enjoyed scaring kids. His whole erotic, when he gets a hard-on or an erection, had nothing to do with wearing eyelashes, makeup for a mature woman. He could have any, he was already promiscuous when he was a teenager. He was already starting to have notions of having sex with children probably by the time he was at 20. From my understanding, from the behavior he exhibited around me when I confronted him, he just what was I talking about? Like I said,
he said if something go with the fawning in his part. So in other words, basically someone let him down and he didn't do nothing about it, and basically violated the other people, thinking that was normal. And to 14-year-olds. So back to when I was thinking about my daughter, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's disgusting. At 16, so this man committed the same thing because he didn't get his help, and now he's put all
his shit on other people.
His shit basically on somebody else's kid.
Yes.
Whether he's famous or not, I don't care, but he altered it. Back to my relationship. Half my life's over, and yes, I want to have sex with another guy. And no, I don't want him. I'm slowly shaking his shit off that I consented. So with Nathan chasing horse because he didn't deal with his BS, violating somebody's child, and that's not okay. It doesn't matter to me if he's famous.
Yeah, but because it went beyond actually like getting sexually aroused at a naked woman. He was already promiscuous, and he already had that. By the time I knew him, he already had 10 children. He'd already, he
knows.
Whatever aroused him was numb. He was getting sexually aroused by instilling the fear in children. That's why by the time I met him, he'd probably already been a pedophile.
Far gone already.
He was already far gone, because when I went to the tribal police, I knew. Like, already 6 months had gone by from the time Roberta had disclosed to me what he did to her. And even then, I tell people, at a sweat where my brother, and my niece and this other woman who gave her daughter to Nathan, they were all in this sweat. When they came out, and there was Roberta, I said in front of all of them, to her, you want to go down to the Bear Butte and fast to prepare to go into Nathan's Sundance. I said, you can't do that. In front of all those people, I challenged Roberta. I said, the reason you can't do that is because you lied to me. I said, right now you're letting everybody know that Nathan Chasing Horse didn't have sex with you. And yet you came to my house in this very home and told me that he only has sex with you because he loves you. Doesn't have sex with his older girlfriend, only you. And he told you he only has sex with her because he loves her. And she denied it. I said, that denial, because you can fight it in me, because not because I was some sort of therapist or holy woman. She was jealous because I was writing a proposal to get more money for him. She didn't want me to, be valuable to him. Her value was in her sexuality because he was in love with her, and she had to prove that to me. So he already knew, and for 6 months, the women who were involved with their daughters, I had confronted them. I had said, this is what my niece had disclosed to me. This is why when I say about women and trauma and triggers and that fawning, they don't want to create conflict, especially when they've had a history of men who've been cheating or drinking or battered women. When I'm talking about an issue, when it has to do with conflict, they fawn away and no, put it over there. And yet for 6 months. So when he came back, and I couldn't do anything because he was in the States. So when he came back in the fall, this was after Dan was arrested for sexual interference with Roberta. See, even that, people don't realize that Dan and Nathan had made an agreement. They were using Roberta as a, like a negotiating. Spiritual.
Trafficking, they call that.
Yes.
Under legal, it's human trafficking.
Exactly. But see, my brother didn't understand it, and that's why when I talk about human trafficking too, I said people don't even know they're trafficking even within their own homes in First Nations. Because like say for example, where you come from, like where your mom's from. When I went up there when my brother got married, and I saw all the 15, 14-year-olds pregnant, the girls, and I thought, what? They're too young to be having babies.
It's because we failed, or I'm part of that pool. They failed to educate her at 10 or 9 about what you said earlier in our talk.
Yeah, that we have choices.
And they didn't. She wasn't educated about it by her parents.
But even too educated about male sexuality. What's so difficult about saying, oh, he has an erection 5 times at night?
Well, the healthy part,
and it's not always about you; it's about other women.
It's like when you teach a child at 10 what the right way of at least helping them down to. Does that make any sense at all?
What do you mean?
To prevent someone from being pregnant that early. How would we have prevented that from happening? Even though it's sexually, they want to have sex with someone. How do you say? Because I was in there too, thinking that was normal. Now, when I think about what we talked about earlier,
what do you mean normal? You got to be curious.
What we talked about earlier about helping our girls, like helping. It's normal to have sex and boundaries and fawning. And then when I was in that era too. And because of the residential school playing a part in it, and they weren't they weren't physically talking to us, or they didn't show the love enough, so we thought that was normal. And that even created babies sooner than you shouldn't be yet.
Yeah, because they're still looking for love.
Yes, because that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but see, a lot of times adults, because their daughters have become pregnant, will just traffic their daughters
and
to
trafficking
to whoever
is legal. I mean, illegal, because when I went to America, that's all I saw too was signage in the bathrooms, and the bathroom stalls about human trafficking, and these were the list of numbers to contact.
Yes, because ritual abuse has been around from the beginning of time.
Abuse, yeah.
And so the more people are talking about it, so even though it seems like normal behavior in Indigenous communities, because here's my teenage daughter, I'm allowing her to be in this relationship because she's having sex with him. That's trafficking, because the child doesn't understand consent. They're just obeying, saying okay, I'm like, for whatever reason, they're taking away that extra mouth to feed, or like she'll be okay, she'll be looked after, but really it's a form of trafficking.
It is to me. It's trafficking.
See, so when
doesn't matter
whatever Nathan had negotiated with my brother, he'd already been doing this. Obviously, maybe even 10 years before. Okay, because when he came up, I called the tribal police. And I explained to them, I said, yeah, my niece disclosed this, that Nathan Chasing Horse was having sex with her. Okay, rather, under the law in Alberta, say I'm the informant. I'm protected by the law, but the police will protect my identity, especially when it comes to somebody disclosing someone is a pedophile. Asutuna police didn't. They said to me, call him and tell him to come and visit us. Okay, and understand, okay, what is trafficking? Yeah, my brother was arrested. I'm not standing to protect him. This was a thing that happened 6 months before months before he was arrested. On top of that, whatever my brother was doing prior to Nathan Chasing Horse entering his life, that whatever that history was, I knew nothing about. I just knew that I had been sounding the alert with women for 6 months. I thought he's up in Canada. Now's the time to have him questioned. Rather than them just keeping me anonymous, they had me call Nathan. That was the only documentation I had. Nobody, it was obvious Roberta was going to lie because she lied 6 months before. I knew that, but I knew she truly believed he loved her. I knew that too. So I called him up and I said, I disclosed to the tribal police what Roberta had told me, what happened to you with her, and they want to question you. They'd like you to come to the tribal police office. And I knew it was a naive thing for me to say to him, but I thought for him as a youth worker, supposedly a legitimate youth worker, mm-hmm. if he was a wachashta washte, or if he would, and that's a good man. I'm not calling him a holy man. Like I say, I've never gave him tobacco to be a holy person. Never. I said to him, they want you to go to the police. They want you to come to their office to make a statement. Mm-hmm. See, they weren't going to search him out. Mm-hmm. He was in Canada. They could have physically found out where he was staying and said, we want to speak to you. They didn't. It was in their power to do that. When I disclosed, I knew that was the law in Alberta, and the tribal police let me down. Why? Because I'm an Indigenous woman? Because what? I'm looking like I'm sticking up for my brother? And Nathan didn't even blink an eye. Didn't even go to the tribal police. Because I knew, okay, this is my rationale behind it. I knew if he legitimately went to the police and he spoke to the police, I knew if he said to the police, oh, there's just a little girl infatuated with me. I have a girlfriend. See, here she is. I have a girlfriend. I have all these women in Sutena with their daughters infatuated with me because I'm a movie star. I get this all the time. That could have been his story, but he didn't even bother to go. I knew if he went there and said that to the tribal police would have got my niece Roberta, and they would have sat her down, and then they would have said, this is what he said. He says that you're infatuated with him, just like all the other mums and daughters in Sutena. You know what Roberta would have done? Tell me, you knew Roberta. What do you think she would have done?
She would have said, I love him. She wouldn't have said nothing and said it was a lie. She would not said anything at all. She would have just...
No, see, Roberta would have gotten mad. Roberta would have said he's a liar. Roberta loved him. If he had disclosed that she was just making it up and heard it from an authority like the police, she would have gotten mad.
Defended him, in other words.
No, she would have said, no, he's lying. It would have broke her heart that the man who claimed to love her is telling another man, a policeman, that she's lying. That he never said he loved her, that he never had sex with her. That it's just a little girl's fantasy. She would have gotten mad.
Yeah, she would be mad. She would have been mad, for sure. She would have been angry. Let down.
She would, yeah.
And angry.
And that's why I called him. The police weren't going to act on it. The police were never going to act on it. But at least my talking to him, if he was innocent, which I knew he wasn't, I believed Roberta 6 months before. But I knew that if push came to shove and he admitted, yes, I have all these women fawning over me. I have all these women limerenced over me, this allure. And it's all based on trauma, okay? Because the denial of trauma, it's like having that allure, the mystique. It's like taking something that was private and putting it into a public performance piece. She would have gotten mad if he had actually gone to the police, but he didn't. And the fact that he didn't go to police even made it more convincing that what he had done to Roberta was true. It just wasn't just a simple thing that I had to fight through. She became a danger to herself and others after Dan was arrested. She tried breaking into my house to see her brother and sister. And then she tried to kill him too, my brother, and she tried to attack her mother. And even when her mom was dying in the hospital with cancer, they had to stop her from coming onto the ward because she was so angry at her mom.
For not.
Yeah, she became a danger to herself and others. See, it's one thing that Nathan created a false narrative about me with all of his followers for 20 years. When I met those ladies in Nevada and they shook my hand, hugged me, they knew who I was. They knew I wrote this blog, and they were grateful, because if they hadn't read it, they wouldn't have realized there was something happening. That fawning stage, they were getting some reality check there. But all that, they didn't know. They did not know the struggle I was having just to protect my niece and nephew. And the fact that when Dan was arrested, I think it was a month before Nathan came back, I went to Chief and Counsel in public, talking directly in council. I said, I need to have my niece and nephew come back to Sutina because they're arrested in the city. Mm-hmm. There's no way I could argue for Roberta because she wasn't a nation member. And because Child and Family is under provincial and federal jurisdiction on the reserve, does not make it a sovereign, Sutina as being sovereign. They're hands off from Child and Family. But I could ask them to negotiate with Child and Family in the city to bring mm-hmm. the two back. Mm-hmm. And they did. That's why I argue sovereignty with Child and Family is for the nation to build their own child shelter and own child group home mm-hmm. for our children, our high-risk children, mm-hmm. instead of sending them into the city run by the provincial government. Mm-hmm. We need to run it ourselves, because just as easy as it is to heal a village to raise a child, the reality, it takes a village to heal a high-risk child. It's one thing the Crane family could have stepped in to help heal Roberta, mm-hmm. but she was in the system in the city. We had no access to her. If we had a group home or shelter in Sutina, mm-hmm. with Sutina people looking after her, understanding the family, she'd have interaction with her brother and sister. She would have interaction with me and her other aunties and uncles and her cousins, but they didn't. Yeah. They isolated her, and she was trafficked in the city. My brother and my older niece, the one who still had been following Nathan, had access to her. They take her to see Nathan. See, those followers that greeted me and thanked me for my blog, mm-hmm. they didn't really understand the whole picture. And a lot of people in Sutina too don't understand the whole picture. You know, like the struggle I had with just trying to help Roberta, and even too, like when I the second time I came back from Las Vegas, I never told twice on March 11th and the 27th. I didn't tell anybody I was going. The first time, not even my brothers and sisters. Nobody knew. The only time they knew is when I was down there on the 11th and I showed it on Facebook. The second time, I didn't tell the same two people. I didn't tell, the people in Sutina that I, was close to. Non-family members, I didn't tell them. This one lady wrote this to me. Marina, I can't believe you're in Las Vegas. Well, Marina, what's that verdict for that creepy loser you went to go see? I wouldn't spend a penny on someone like that creep after what he's done to my relative. Marina, I wouldn't care less if this man died. I don't know him, but Marina, seems you like to enjoy this thing you're doing. So I'll leave it there. You know where I stand regarding this person. Then I made a comment that I didn't like those women that had come up and showed me some respect. I just said, well, I met people. Oh, wow, you made friends. How great. I said, well, I'm there to support them. Wouldn't you support me? And she says, Marina, I worry about you been down there alone. It's good to meet people down there. Enjoy yourself. Like I said, we're getting old. Laugh out loud. So what's the conclusion on this person you moving forward? Was so-and-so one of the girls from your down there with you? I didn't even answer her.
I still think you should always be a voice to anybody and everybody. And yes, go support, not that it's a sick act. It's you're there to stand up for what really happened. I see what she means by making that comment, but I'm glad you went there to go and see that, yeah, it's like you want to have a rally. You don't want to just let him go to a court system because he violated someone or many people. It's better to still go see what's happening on this man, By going there, that's a big deal to me. To me, that's important.
Well, see, what people don't understand, too, is like when I first started...
I would waste money because there's people that are not even alive today because of him.
Yes, like Roberta. And I know there are some young women
changed their life.
From Fort Peck who had been institutionalized in the state hospital because they tried to kill themselves.
Yeah, and that too. There's people. That's why it's important to get over there because there's people now that their lives have been altered. They're not either
the rest of their lives. Because again, when I talk about consent, when he violated a child under the age of 10, that because they cannot comprehend consent in their brain.
No,
they cannot for the rest of their lives. He that's it. And even too, when he attacked children under the age of 16, again, who are trying to understand consent, that's still damaging in brain development. And when I talk about my own life, I say, no, when I was sexually assaulted, I was at the age of consent. I was 19. I understood consent.
Mm-hmm.
But for children who don't, and they have that limerence, because there's different degrees of limerence. My limerence, I always use like wachashta washtes throughout my life to motivate me to do something. Because I've always done something by myself. So I'm going to share this with you. With Dan, and this is what I said too, he did this crime 20 years ago, and this lady, I don't know her, but she knows me. She says this is she's talking about Dan. She says this is him pushing his way into the space where he should be banished. It's disgusting as fuck. I know what he did to Roberta, and his sick sister Marina Crane sticks up for him. She is a child predator herself.
You're not. Talk about everybody and anybody. If it's your own brother, then that needs to be dealt with. Because again, they have altered the person as a child.
And she goes on, Sutana should banish him holding sweat lodges, but then he has another counselor inviting visitors to ceremony with him. Again, disgusting. Now, what makes this so heartbreaking is that my niece, the one who followed Nathan, her daughter commented and says, thank you. I know how isolating it could be too. After this long, it's like she swore, I appreciate you. Like she was communicating with this woman on Facebook. My older brother's granddaughter is saying this. Eleanor said, don't let her get to you.
Compassion, that's all we can give and forgive. But back to, that's why we need to talk today. That's why with my marriage, I'm going to rise above this, help my children shed off that BS about the system, what I think is right and wrong about, the biblical, I'm a human being.
Yes.
And speak up for the woman. It's okay to have sex as long as you are consenting, you love the guy, or don't do the like you're saying, the limerence. And you wonder, and now I see as Native people, nobody wants the testes, nobody wants to talk about it, especially if it's your own relative. It always seems to be a hush-hush anywhere and everywhere. There's not too many people like yourself that speak.
Because
nobody wants to rattle, but like I said,
the rattling part is called fawning.
Yes,
if they're rattling, then it's going to bring conflict to you and whoever you love. See, and for me, I'm going, my brother paid whatever. Like when my mom died, I made sure for the whole year, like I had to do a giveaway. And so you'd walk the whole year. The way creator's watching you for the whole year, how you walk, because you're representing the person who died. You're representing, like I represented my mother, because I'm trying to say to creator, she was a good woman. She deserves to go into the Milky Way. She deserves that. I'm going to prove to you that she deserves this. So at the end of the year, I did Wiping Away Tears ceremony, Releasing Soul ceremony, and I had a giveaway, a round dance and a feast. Now, Roberta died. My going down to that courthouse, I gifted the mom and daughter, just like with the two of you, I gifted those two women 2 star blankets. And that Wachashtawashte, I gifted him a lighter. Because, why? I was releasing Roberta's soul. Saying she's a good girl. Her soul needs to be released so she can walk off to the Milky Way.
That's why to me it was important you went to the courts to spend that money, because you needed to, like Roberta needed to
be released.
Because she is just as important as everybody else that needed that help by yourself, by being in attendance.
See, and people didn't realize too. They only believed what Larry's daughter said about me, or what they thought about Roberta. Like the ladies I gifted the blanket to, I said, no, she was born addicted. Her mother had a high-risk lifestyle. Roberta didn't even have a chance. She was already addicted when she was born. Her mother gave her up when she was 2. She was sexually assaulted in a group home in Vancouver, brought to Sutina. Like she was very, as a child, she was already quite, her behavior was really bad. Like she was even sexually abusing, I won't say who, as a child. See, and a lot of people don't understand when I talk about high-risk teenagers or high-risk children, it's because whatever was done to them sexually, they mimic it. They do it to other children. Because they're looking for love.
That's back to when you went someplace where the 15-year-olds were pregnant. That's what I mean. Back to that topic, and that's not okay.
Yeah, it's not okay because it's a form of trafficking.
Because nowadays people are being trafficking. People are not here with us today, not in this world. And there's people that are institutionalized because they didn't know how to deal with it in their brain.
Exactly.
Period.
Yes.
And I don't have a PhD to say that, so
yes,
I'm a deserving female myself now.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, even though we've lived this life, we're still constantly learning.
And I'll never stop learning. I didn't forget that. I told Jane, I'm not old, but you never stop learning.
So I usually have my podcast go for an hour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end this, but I want to continue this topic because I think you need to understand what happened in Las Vegas. But I really appreciate if you have any last comments about just what we've talked about.
I think you're a champ. We need a lot of champs. In terms of speaking up, realities of our body makeups our sex, you know. Men and women are too different.
Yes.
Let that be a good kind of love, not a psychotic.
Well, I think too. There's a bit of
ways.
There's a bit of confusion too, especially when you have so many young people who don't understand matriarchy. Like for me, I'm an elder now, but I was raised in a matriarchal society by my mom and my grandmothers. Young people are raised in patriarchy, whereas there's a conflict because it's cultural. I live my culture because of how I was raised, matriarchy. And so I was talking to this Wachasha Washdea's partner, and she was talking about matriarchy, and I said, no. I said, you have to be born into it, and you have to be raised in it. See, and a lot of our young people are raised in matriarchy, but they're getting confused because there's patriarchy in it too. Unless you're actually living in the community, then the community helps you understand what matriarchy is. But if you're out there in the city and it's all patriarchy and you're already confused about it, then of course you're going to have issues with your own culture.
So there is a big difference.
Definitely a
Very
big difference.
Huh?
Yes, because with matriarchy, like I said, my responsibility, like with wiping away tears ceremony, releasing soul ceremony, that's a matriarchal thing. My duty is to make sure, like even how I take care of my brother's children, like even fighting, even though, you know, I could have been living in Utah. No connection for 20 years without, like within my family or community. But the fact that I came home, embraced my matriarchy the way I was raised, and having all these other people not understanding it. Why? Because you're ashamed to be Indigenous? You're ashamed of your sexuality as a matriarch? No. I think that's part of why I do my podcast, is to make people understand there is a difference, a gender difference in how you were raised, and how tradition, ritual, and ceremony play a big key in how to heal. Like I said, it takes a village to heal a child. It's going to take a village to heal a high-risk child. Or they say it takes a village to raise a child, but it takes a village to also heal a high-risk child. And if that village isn't coherent, holistic, and what's the collective, because of colonizers breaking it apart, having these programs that are funded by the federal government, by white man's policies under child and family, then we're not going to.
Don't have that.
Yeah, we don't have that. We don't have the collective and holistic approach.
Basically, they need to not bother.
For thousands of years.
Ancestry ago.
Yes.
Way.
Yes, and see, the reality of it is like, hello, would I be here if those prayers of the grandfathers and grandmothers did not make sense?
It was here
way before the colonizers.
Yeah, way before them.
That's why I say the first 100 years, colonizers, the Portuguese, Dutch, British, French,
Spaniards,
and Spaniards, they murdered 5 generations of children. In the first 100 years, they killed 100 million children. And today, we're still seeing our children being attacked. When a woman, a single parent woman, has, say, 5 kids and she dies, who's going to look after them? Immediately, they're shipped into the city. When it shouldn't be happening, they should be here in the community, in a group home or a group shelter, and having community members, even their extended family, working with them in those shelters, as well as their families, community, because this is where they belong and this is where they're going to live and thrive. It's just that basic. And yet colonizers, educated people, mental health workers or social workers or whatever the hell they think they are, have the audacity to come into our communities and explain to us.
How to parent.
Exactly. I have a cousin who worked 20 years with Child and Family. She had to look after her grandson. Child and Family, the provincial Child and Family came in, had to check her whole house, document everything to prove she was a good person. Even though she had worked all those decades.
To provide the necessities of...
Yeah, and yet I'm going, what the hell?
Right?
You could have a PhD, and because of provincial standards, and because you're Indigenous, living in an Indigenous community, you have to obey those laws because it has nothing to do with our sovereignty. If we had our sovereignty, we would have said, that woman has worked 20 years protecting our children. But they don't. And we have brothers and sisters fighting and saying, no, I'm working, doing this. I don't want to have nothing to do with all this dysfunction. Called bullshit dysfunction. This is life. Mm-hmm. If this is such a high standard, where on the other side of the world are you going to operate when people are dying and their things are so, like it's...
chaotic.
Yes.
Chaos, just chaos.
Yes. So anyway, I'll end this and then I'll start a new one, but I really appreciate your insight because most of the time when I do talk to people, it's on the phone too, and then I record it.
That's why I thought,
you're going to have a smoke break.